Hello, buddy. Welcome back to Tin Man's Court Channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I wanted to do another ranking video for you guys, but I figured I'd go ahead and rank some famous movie knives. And the knives I'm going to be ranking are from my all-time favorite action movie series, Rambo, starring Sylvester Stallone. So this is how I'm going to rank them. I'm going to rank them from my least favorite all the way up to my all-time favorite. But anyway, I'm going to turn these lights off and move the camera up here for you guys, and I'll show you where each knife ranks on my list. Okay, coming in my last place spot, number 12, is the boot knife from Rambo First Blood Part 2. I got this one way down low on my list because, one, it's not one of those big knives that you will see Rambo use mainly in the films, but that boot knife did help him get out of a jam in Part 2. I think he used it again in Part 3 in the cave scene where he pushed the top of the bullet head off just to get powder out of the shell casing to help mend his wound. So that's why it's very low on my list. Okay, coming in at number 11 is Jimmy Lile's First Blood prototype knife. I am glad that Sylvester Stallone and the filmmakers of First Blood did not go with this knife because, one, it just looks like a standard cheap looking survival knife or hunter's knife. But then he also made another prototype that had a different handle with a similar blade on here. Look, let me pull that one up real quick. If they used this knife for the other one I just showed you in First Blood, then that knife probably would have been as iconic as green wire wrapped handle survival knife that was in that film. Okay, coming in at my number 10 spot is the MK8 Bowie knife from Rambo 5 Last Blood. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a cool looking knife. I just got to lower on my list because it just doesn't scream as a knife that Rambo would use, technically. Because all the other knives he had in the films before this one were bigger blades. This one just looks like a standard small 8-inch hunting Bowie that you could buy at a either army surplus store or hunting and camp store. It's still a cool blade, nevertheless. I mean, Dietmar Pohl must have studied a bunch of American knife making designs while he was designing this one, and it came out pretty good. My number 9 pick is Jimmy Lile's Rambo 3 prototype knife. Now, I just saw a video done by another incredible knife YouTuber named Greg Foster over at Greg Blades and the Collectibles. He was just talking about this knife. He got somebody to make a replica for him. And what he told me when he replied back to my comment is that Jimmy Lile and Sylvester Stallone kind of had a handshake agreement when they did the first 2 movies together, but he didn't want to be involved in Part 3 because he figured that the movie companies would get most of the shares of royalties when they start making replicas of this knife. And Jimmy Lile just pretty much backed out. And plus, I think Stallone loved the knife, but he wanted to move on to somebody else, so that's why they got Gil Hibben to make the knife for that movie. But it's still a cool knife. You can see it's got like hints of Pakistani handle design in it, as well as how the blade is shaped, which I think Gil kind of took, but he modified his a little bit because his blade has got like a point that stops right here and swedges downward and swoops out, while this was just a continuous swoop. All right, coming in at number 8 is Gil Hibben's Rambo 4 Big John Machete prototype. This is a cool blade too. I wish they went with this route, but Stallone made a good point to Gil Hibben that he's going to be in a jungle and he won't have the materials to make a nice shiny blade like this. And I think Gil was still a huge fan of his Rambo 3 design, and he wanted to continue it forward as a machete. Sly turned this one down because he said he wanted something that looks more brutal and looks like you handmade it instead of making it with a machine. Now, you can buy replicas of this through United Cutlery, but I think they just call it the Hibben 4 Combat Machete, which is a good name for it because it does look combat-ish. Falling in at number 7 is the Pohl Force MK11 Concept Bowie Machete. Now, Dietmar Pohl, who designed the knives for Rambo 5, wanted to use this one as the main knife for Last Blood because he read the script and he figured, okay, it's got to be tough as a combat knife, but it has to be sharp enough like a chopper, basically. So he decided to design another machete similar to the one that was in Rambo 4, but I think Stallone and the movie people said it's a cool knife, but they're not going to use it. They don't want that. They wanted another type of survival knife, and that's why we got the Heartstopper, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. It's going to be higher on my list. But I mean, I saw Dietmar Pohl's YouTube channel, and he showed this blade off. I said, man, he's now offering replicas of this for sale. If I had the money, I would not mind owning one myself. I just wish we got to see this one on screen and in action. You'll be definitely chopping up those Mexican cartel guys up for sure. My number 6 Rambo knife spot is filled out by this prototype that was used only once in Rambo 3. It's designed by Hibben, and I think Gil wanted to stay true to the first 2 movies and go back with a survival knife type design, but Stallone pretty much said no, done that, and he wanted something else. So this knife was scrapped, but it did get used, like I mentioned. If you watch the scene at night where Rambo's like digging the knife like inside the ground, looking for landmines, it was that knife, not the main Rambo 3 knife that you see him use throughout the rest of the film. But this knife is so cool looking, I wouldn't mind having a replica. And I found out through another mutual knife collector and reviewer, Cowboy Seabaugh from KTV Knife Television. He said Gil used a bike handle for the knife handle. I was like, now that's ingenious. But yeah, this is something wicked cool. I'm just glad that it's now getting a lot of recognition, because I suppose back in the 80s, nobody hardly talked about this knife until now. And the number 5 spot is the very first Rambo knife in the movies. And it's the First Blood survival knife designed by Jimmy Lile. Now, like I showed you with his prototype and what Jimmy Lile was thinking of, he was just going to go with a straight blade survival knife type design with no serrated edges. But I think when Stallone met him, he told him what he wanted, and he said he could do it. And he delivered on a cool knife design. Now, I know a lot of people would say this knife would be like up at their number 1 spot because it's the very first knife and it's a cool, wicked survival knife. I get it, but for me, I kind of like the Part 2 survival knife better than this one. But it's still a cool blade and a must-have for every Rambo knife collector out there. But this is the one that started it all. But it will still go down in movie history as one of the coolest movie knives ever conceived. Coming in at number 4 is the Rambo 5 Last Blood MK9 knife. And Stallone nicknamed it the Heartstopper, which is a fitting name since, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the film already, he takes the main head cartel guy and impale him to one of the barn walls with arrows. He shot right through his shoulders and legs, and Rambo walks up on him with this knife and stabs him in the chest and rips his entire heart out of his chest cavity. I said that was one brutal and epic scene. But like I said, with the Pole Force MK11 concept machete blade, Dietmar read the script and he was calling for like some sort of survival type knife, and Stallone and the movie people did not want another machete, so he wanted something of like knife making of the future. So Dietmar came up with this, and I said, that's actually not a bad looking blade. And he kind of pays tribute with the First Blood knife, because like if you look at the specs of this knife compared to the First Blood knife, it's roughly about the same blade length and handle length. And in this picture, it looks like a sand tan color was used for the handle. But some people were saying, oh, it's OD green. But I just love its design, and I never even heard of a sub-hilt fighter knife. And some people are not a huge fan of those designs, but I'm starting to dig them now. And the fact that it had a skull crusher on this knife, too, like the Bowie, really makes this knife give off a more tactical appearance. And you definitely don't want to be in the receiving end of this blade either. And my number 3 spot is the Rambo First Blood Part 2 survival knife. Like I said with the first survival knife from First Blood, I kind of like this one better because one, Jimmy Lile made the blade a tad bit bigger than the first one and added this cool black coating on the blade and wrapped the handle in black twine. Really makes this thing look more tactical. And I love the scene where those Vietnamese pirates portrayed him and the Vietnam girl that was helping him. And one of them wrapped a cord around his neck and he pulled that knife out and stabbed that guy through the stomach. I was like, oh, yeah. Especially when you get stabbed by a blade with serrated edges like that. Imagine the deep wound channel. There ain't no way you can stitch that up. And I really got mad when that Russian guy put that blade into like a little stove and heated up the tip just to interrogate Rambo with it, because I would be afraid that the tip would have been overheated and warped and Rambo would have had a broken blade, but it still held up for all that and he got it back to finish his mission. And my friend Cowboy C-Bob over at the KTV Knife Television channel mentioned this, that if you watch Rambo 4, the director's cut, he throws this knife in the fire of a burning pirate ship, like he gave up that life, he was done and over with it. But it would have been more common sense to throw away the Rambo Part 3 knife. Coming in at number 2 is the Machete from Rambo 4, or just simply Rambo. I can't help it, folks. I'm just a huge fan of bigger blades. And when I saw that scene where Rambo got awakened by the pasture of that group that he already took it into the jungle, saying that they were taken, he goes into the blacksmith shop and starts forging this sucker out. That was one epic scene. And Stallone told Gil Hibben to make something brutal. He delivered on it. Now, this blade was not only used in Rambo 4, but it was also used in Rambo 5 in like the beginning of the film, like you see it hanging up on like a little wall coat hanger thing. But it was polished up. It won't looking black like this. It was more like that. But it was cool to see it back in action in Rambo 5 where he threw it at one of the bad guys' head and it impaled him. And he used it to chop off another guy's leg. But this is still a cool, epic blade, even though it's just a handcrafted machete. Finally, on my number 1 spot, my favorite Rambo knife of all time is the Rambo 3 Bowie by Gil Hibben. Stallone did not want the green-handled survival knife prototype that he came up with, so he came up with this knife, and originally he made up a bunch of them that had an extra knife that came out of the slot right here. It kind of opened up like one of Batman's batarangs, but Stallone looked at that and went like, nope, don't want that. And plus, Gil was known for fantasy knife making, so you kind of see a little bit of fantasy elements in this blade, like how long the knife blade is and the style of guard and handle he used. But it's also cool that if you see these notches right here, they're for a tribute for his Baker team in Vietnam. So it's almost like in spirit, the Baker team are still with him. So I hope you guys enjoy my ranking of all the Rambo knives, including the prototypes, some of the films. And looking at these blades just make me wish that I had these knives in my collection right now. But you never know what the future may hold. I might end up grabbing some of these to review. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more ranking videos. Let me know down in the comments, how would you rank these Rambo knives? And this has been another successful installment of the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I said that's a wrap, and that's Dale.